Hey guys, Toby Mathis here, and today we're going to be talking about Medicaid trusts, what they are, what they're not, how they're misrepresented sometimes, and I'm going to bring in an expert. First off, Jonathon Evans of Anderson Business Advisor, trust attorney, and specializes in this area. Hey, Jonathan,
Hey Toby, how you doing today?
doing fantastic. And let's lay out some facts, John. So let's say that a typical client's worth $1 million. They're a millionaire. They have net worth of $1 million. Maybe it's in their house. Maybe they have some retirement funds whatsoever, but they have $1 million. They're in their 60s, and maybe they're really worried in their family, dementia or health issues that run in their family, and they are worried they're going to end up in a nursing home, and all of their money is going to be gone, and none of it is going to go to their kids. How realistic is that? What is kind of can you throw some averages at us of what people are really looking at, and are there solutions to keep that from happening?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is becoming a more common question that we're running into because people are noticing that the average cost of healthcare nowadays for a private room in a nursing home that just crossed about 11,000 a month, and that's for average care, right? That's not necessarily the high end care that you'd be looking for. So when people hear that, and you hear that $1 million that you've been working hard to save up, and you're going to be paying 11,000 a month on average for that long term care, you're looking at maybe 8 years that you'd be able to get out of that tops. And that can be pretty scary, thinking that everything you've put together for your family is going to disappear, go into the nursing home, and there won't be anything left to leave as far as your estate goes.
Yeah, you're talking less than yeah, like 90 months. That and everything's gone. That's
Right,
down to zero.
right.
So what do you do?
Yeah. So, what a lot of people are pitching nowadays is something called an irrevocable Medicaid planning trust. And it's designed to take advantage of this loophole built into the Medicaid program that was specifically designed for impoverished people. So, people who just can't afford long term care. So, what these folks pitch is, hey, let's create this irrevocable trust. It's going to take all of your assets, you're going to transfer everything there. You're going to make yourself impoverished, legally speaking. And now you're going to get your long term care on the government's dime, and everything still goes to your kids. So, as people are worried about all of these expenses and what it's going to mean for them in the future, it's like they're being tossed this lifeline. So, it's really gaining a lot of traction out there.
All right, so I got $1 million in my estate, and some lawyer comes up, and says, "Hey, if you're worried about using all that in your retirement on a nursing home, why don't we just give it away? We'll give it to a trust." And I'm assuming there's some periods where you probably have a seasoning period or a look back period. I'm assuming that there's actually a definition for what it means to be impoverished. So let's just say you're trying to get your assets below a certain threshold. And you do this, and magically you're going to qualify as an impoverished individual under Medicaid. And by the way, there's a difference between Medicaid and Medicare. Medicare is the insurance at 65 that we all pay into as employees. Medicaid is for the impoverished people. I sometimes use them interchangeably. I'm sure it confuses some people, but Medicaid is what we're talking about. It's covers the dime on your nursing home facility or your long term care, memory care, all those things. The government picks it up. The taxpayer picks it up. So is that the scenario? So here's the lawyer talking to me. I'm $1 million, and I transfer that into some sort of trust. What are the rules? And is that even accurate?
Yeah, so that's the general idea, but they gloss over a lot of the details, a lot of the fine print. And when you start looking at the fine print of how these things actually work, you start to realize that what these guys are pitching, it's actually a cure that's worse than the disease. Because if you step back and look at it, you're legally making yourself impoverished. To do that, you have to lose all control over your assets. You're giving up your financial independence. And at the end of the day, Medicaid's a form of welfare. So you're looking at welfare level health care, and there's a 5 year clock built into this. So there's a bit of a gamble where you have to basically sit down and guess, when are you going to need this long term care assistance from Medicaid? And if you don't time that right, you've set yourself up in this legal set of handcuffs where you can't control your assets, you don't own them anymore. If you end up outliving your need for this long-term care, and you end up passing away without needing it, you did it all for nothing. If you don't time it right, let's say you go 4 years and 10 months, you're right on the cusp of timing it right, well, suddenly you fail, and Medicaid's going to come in and say you don't qualify, and we're not going to help you for a certain period of time, depending on how much you've transferred to that trust.
Yeah, there's like a penalty. Is it's 5 years, and it's not like they just grab the item and use it. They just say you can't use Medicaid for a certain period of time. What is it, like the average nursing home divided into the amount that you transferred, and that's the number of months that you don't get coverage. So
Yeah, exactly. They do this exhaustive 60-month audit. So they look back 5 years, they look at all of your financial records, every bank statement, every tax return, every real estate transfer. And what they're doing is these state auditors, they're looking for any reason to deny you that help. They're looking for any asset that you transferred for less than fair market value, whether that was a gift or like a sweetheart deal where it went to a kid or a friend or something like that, because they know that there's this incentive for this loophole. If you can make yourself poor by giving everything away right before you need the help, they're going to be looking for that. And that's why there's that 5-year period.
what does
So
it mean to be looking poor? Is there a threshold? Like, is it 100 grand? Is it 1,000? What is it?
yeah, it's actually 2,000 in liquid assets seems to be the average threshold.
Wait. So you can have $2,000 to your name
Right,
to
right,
qualify
exactly.
for Medicaid.
Right. So you have to really put everything into this trust for it to work right.
What about your house? Like, is this something where, again, I'll use my scenario, I have $1 million, maybe half of it's my house equity, maybe I got some in a retirement plan. I have to give all those away? Like, I have to transfer those into a trust? Can I still
Yeah.
live in the
So
house? Am I, what if somebody decides to sell my house or do something else with it or kick me out? Are those things real possibilities?
they technically are, because at the end of the day, you're trying to make it look like you have nothing on paper. And the trust is written in a way where if you have any kind of access, it's going to fail that audit, that look back. So the ideal Medicaid planning trust, you really are putting a whole lot of faith in whoever's going to be running that trust for you, because you're not going to own anything that's in that trust, including the home if you transfer it to it, or anything like that.
I'm assuming I can't be the trustee of that trust either, right?
Correct, because that would give you access, that would give you control, and they would call all of those countable assets for that look back period, and that would disqualify you.
Could I hire an attorney to be the trustee, or does it have to be an independent third party?
So it can be family members, and often people will name family members, but it can get a little dicey there, because if family members start using the trust to support you in certain ways, there have been cases where people have failed that look back test because of that.
Okay, and I want to make sure people understand this. So the look back is 5 years. So I am getting older. I got $1 million. I have to transfer this at least 5 years. So 60 months before I need Medicaid, right? So like I can't be in a situation where my health is failing. I go to a nursing home and then I do this and I'm trying to qualify for Medicaid. I have to wait 5 years. Is that right?
Right, exactly. Because what they do is they look back and they look at the total amount of the value of whatever you transferred to the trust, to friends, whatever it was, and they combine that all together and they do a little bit of math and say, hey, well, if the average cost per month for long-term care is 10,000 and you transferred 200,000 that in a way that violates this look back, well, now you have 20 months where we're not going to help you. But then on the flip side of that, you've locked everything into this trust. You can't get the cash back out. So now you're stuck in a position where you can't get to your money and you don't get help from Medicaid. So now you've got to hope that your family can find some kind of private funds or something like that to get you taken care of while you wait for that penalty period to lapse.
So you can't use the trust funds either, or would they dip into the trust funds at that point?
So if they do dip into the trust funds, then that counts as countable assets, and that
Mhm.
triggers that issue of you no longer qualify for
Oh
that help.
wow! So it's just going to keep pushing that 5 years. Even so, you already got a penalty, and now you're going to have additional
Right.
APA. So you're in a rock and a hard place if that happens.
Right, exactly. It's a really risky gamble.
So why do people do these then? It sounds like it could be a horrible idea.
So largely it's motivated from that fear that we talked about at the beginning, right? What if everything I've been working hard for just ends up going to the nursing home and I have nothing to show for it for my family?
why wouldn't you just get like long-term care coverage, or get a like an index universal life policy or a whole life policy or something with a rider that allows you to access the death benefit so you could pay for nursing home, and then when you pass it pays it back, things like that. Like there's other products out there. I just the two off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's others.
Yeah, yeah, those really are the gold standard nowadays when you're looking for help funding long-term care. The previous policies that used to be a use it or lose it setup, those have largely disappeared because the market has spoken. It's kind of lousy to take that kind of gamble, and if you don't end up needing long-term care, you don't get anything from that insurance policy that you've been paying for. So nowadays, like you said, you get that permanent life insurance with a long-term care rider, and now you get both benefits. If you end up needing the care, you've got that pool of cash that you can pull from. If you don't, then your family still gets the death benefit. So that's a much better way to plan for this situation.
All right, but people are pitching these Medicaid trusts, right? So like I guess I want to dive into, are they effective? Is this actually going to accomplish anything, or am I inviting somebody to scrutinize the hell out of me? So again, let me change the facts a little bit. Let's say that you're a $3 million estate, and you're like, oh, I want to make sure this goes to my kids. I've actually had this, so like I know there's people out there like this. It was about $5 million estate, but I'll just say three. And they were like, oh, I want to get it to my kids before, so that nobody can take it from me. It was really interesting. And I said, well, like you're going to make yourself worthless so you can get it to your kids. Like I wouldn't necessarily advise that, but let's just say you did that. Let's say that you listened to some Medicaid trust attorney or salesman. A lot of these guys aren't attorneys at all, and they convince you to transfer this money into a trust. Maybe it's one of your kids that's the trustee. Is that it? Like, do I win, or am I inviting a nightmare into my life if I actually try to use it for Medicaid?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's actually a case that came out of New Jersey recently. It's an elderly woman named Grace. She set up one of these trusts. She put her home into it. And I don't know how she did it, but somehow she timed the 5 year clock perfectly. She waited 62 months, so just a bit over that 60-month requirement before she applied for Medicaid. And then the state of New Jersey took a look at her transfers and saw that she had funded one of these Medicaid trusts. And they said, hey, you made yourself impoverished purposefully. It was your own choice. So we're not going to give you any coverage. So she did lawyer up and she went through the court system. Eventually, she got that decision overturned where the court came down and said, hey, if it was done outside of the 5 year period, even if it was done by choice, then technically it still counts. But get this, when it went back down to the lower court to take another look at it, they went through the trust line by line. And they found some language that restricted what the trustees could do in the right way to make sure that Grace didn't have access to the funds. But at the very end of the trust, in the boilerplate section, they found this little throwaway clause that said that if the trustee wants to, the trustee can pay for her rent and household expenses. And they seized on that and said, nope, these assets are available to you. Even if you haven't used this clause, they're available to you. So we're still going to deny you coverage here. So she went through the expense of setting one of these things up, and the court system did not let her have it. They're looking for reasons to deny people on these things.
My gosh. And I guess I'm thinking about a situation where somebody has a house, they manage to stay in the house. I don't know how that works, whether there's a rent clause or something like that, but let's just say you play this game. And I don't think that's the end all be all, right? Like if somebody's paying for my coverage for my nursing home at a taxpayer funds, my understanding is I think they could go back after your estate and try to go get things. So like even if you kind of finagle it to where it's like, hey, I still have access to some things, maybe it's liquid assets I get below the the 2000 and I qualify for these things, it's not over yet. They may still be going after other assets, the non-liquid assets, right?
Right, exactly. That's the clawback where even at the very end, you think you've gotten this thing to work and you've protected the estate, they can still come back and claw back assets and force them to be sold, basically to pay off whatever Medicaid did spend on you.
And that makes sense. I'm looking at this thinking that I think of these Medicaid trusts, and I think of it as kind of a gaming of the system. I know there's people that use it legitimately, and they're like, oh my gosh, there's not a lot of assets. We're down by 100,000 and we want to get it out of the estate. We'll take care of mom or dad, but eventually we're going to need help. Like we can handle it for 5 years, but after that 5 years, we really need help. And so they start the clock by doing a transfer then. I get that. What I don't get is multimillionaires doing this.
Right.
So that thinking that, oh, I don't want the state to come back and try to take some of my estate. I don't want I don't want to, be private paying for nursing home. Although I think there's probably a big difference between private paying a nursing home and something that's eligible for Medicaid. I'm assuming that there's a market difference. Um, so it just feels wrong to me. How do you feel?
Yeah, yeah, and to your point about difference between what you get through Medicaid and what you get through private pay, and at the end of the day, what a lot of these folks who consider these trusts forget is that Medicaid is a welfare program. So those top tier assisted living, memory care facilities that you picture yourself going to, those don't accept Medicaid. And basically, it boils down to the fact that the state doesn't reimburse them for their costs. It's just a fraction of what they're actually spending to take care of you. So these facilities that do accept Medicaid, that you can get a bed in if you play this game, they're heavily underfunded. They've often got these long wait lists. And because of that, the difference between the kind of care that you're going to get private pay versus Medicaid, it's just night and day. Like if you go private pay, you get that superior care. There's much better staffing ratios. The amenities are much nicer. So people like this idea of making the government pick up the check for their long-term care, but they're still picturing themselves going to these homes that they're not going to qualify or not going to be able to get into with Medicaid.
I want to say it was about 25 years ago that I was a court-appointed guardian for an elderly lady that she had some assets, that she had some homes that were dilapidated and they had tax liens on them, but we were able to sell and create some cash, and we actually private paid into a really nice facility. I won't say where, so nobody's playing around with it, but it was top-notch facility. And then once she spent down, she qualified for Medicaid and they started paying for it. But if she had come in, she would not have been eligible for that facility to come in as Medicaid, right? You had to private pay your way in. And then once you were there, then they couldn't remove you in Medicaid. They had to take Medicaid. I remember that. And she was there for 11 years. She stuck around for a long time. She wanted to get her money's worth, right? But I remember that. And I remember looking at it, and that was probably 25 years ago. But I remember looking at that going, wow, this thing's actually a pretty, it's an interesting system that we've built in making people jump through hoops. Speaking of jumping through hoops, do you have any horror stories? Like, are there any really nasty cases where like somebody did everything right and the state, or I don't know how this works. Is it the federal government or is it the state that usually tries to take a crack at you and say you didn't qualify? Are there any cases like that?
Yeah, yeah. There's this one case out of Michigan that's really jaw dropping. So a husband set up one of these trusts, right, for his wife in anticipation for her needing to go into a nursing home. The trust passes muster as far as all of its provisions, as far as meeting that 5 year clock, but the state denies her, and the family decides to fight back because they feel like they've really got a shot because they very carefully worked with an attorney who specializes in these kinds of trusts. So they decide to fight, and they end up working all the way up to the Michigan Supreme Court, and they win on the initial reason they were denied. But then it gets remanded back down to the lower courts, and they keep finding more and more reasons to refuse to pay. And this litigation's actually been going on for 12 years now, and it's still not resolved. So
Wow.
instead of saving a bunch of money, having the government pick up the wife's long-term care, they've been having to pay for this litigation that's been dragging on for over a decade.
So there are options besides doing Medicaid trusts. And so I guess what I would tell people out there is number one, if you have questions, Jonathan's a great resource. I'll put a link in where you can request a consult with Anderson Business Advisors, where Jonathan and I both work. Um, and you can talk to somebody to see whether this is something you should even be considering. It sounds like you're not really high up on them, Jonathan. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I don't love them just because at the end of the day, if you really look at the statistics, the Department of Health put out a study recently that said that, if you take 10 people, the odds are less than four of them are ever going to step into a long term care facility. Of those four, only about one of them is ever going to be in the facility for more than 3 years. So you're looking at a slightly less than 10% chance of actually running into this nightmare scenario of basically burning through all of your life savings for long term care. And yet people get so wound up about it, they're willing to take this gamble, this 5 year gamble, trying to time their healthcare needs. And at the end of the day, they may just be buying themselves a big lawsuit where they're fighting against a government who knows it's underfunded for this stuff. So they're looking for any and every reason to be able to deny you. So my
And
book, it's, oh, go ahead.
I'm going to interrupt you. And you're impoverished. Sorry,
Right.
but I like that. You literally have to make yourself impoverished.
Right. You give up all financial independence.
Because you're worried about this slight chance, and you could insure against that slight chance. You could do other things for that slight chance, right?
Right. Right. And you're also giving up the facility that you would have put yourself in, just like we were saying.
You're at the mercy of somebody else. It's either the government and the Medicaid program as to what facilities you could actually choose and what they'll actually pay for. You're at the mercy of your trustee now. Hopefully, you don't tick them off.
Right.
Although I don't, those assets are gone, right? They're going to the future generations. It's not necessary for your use anymore. It's gone.
Exactly. It's locked away.
It's locked away. And I don't know, are these grantor trusts where you could even have tax issues when you give the asset away, that you could have a nasty surprise there too?
Yes. Yes. So you can actually run into all kinds of tax complications, especially with certain appreciated assets where normally you could gift those assets through a better version of a trust that would allow a huge tax break for your heirs. These irrevocable trusts make it much more complex to accomplish that, and often you lose it entirely. So at the end of the day, you save some money, but then pass a huge tax bill down to your heirs anyway.
Yeah. And you could have a tax implication, right? If they liquidated off a long-term asset, you have IRMA, you have
Right.
federal tax and state tax issues that you may not have resources now to even pay it. Although maybe you could draft that into the trust that says, hey, it seems like that would be available to the grantor then, and kind of like again get into that 5 year trigger, which it sounds like what happened in New Jersey. It's not as easy as what they're saying, and there are alternatives. Let's just put it that way. Hey, Jonathon,
Right.
I really appreciate you coming on. What I'll do is I'll put a link so that if somebody wants to reach out and have a conversation about this, they certainly can. I would say if you do that, try to get a hold of Jonathon or somebody in his team. When you're setting things up, you might have to talk to a regular person first and then get yourself there. And then leave your comments. Have you had any of this? Have you seen this occur in your family, or do you know somebody that tried to do one of these? Did it work? Did it not work? What were the issues? If you're an attorney, please give your opinion too. That we don't want to be unfair to these, but obviously you have two attorneys here saying kind of like, yeah, maybe under specific circumstances they could work. So maybe if you're an attorney or an accountant or a financial planner, the specific situations that you saw at work, it may help somebody who's reading the comments, who looks at it and goes, oh, that's me. And maybe that's appropriate. That'd be really, really helpful. Jonathon, anything else?
No, really, at the end of the day, Toby, we just don't want to let the tail wag the dog, right? We don't want you to set yourself up in something where you're going to lose your financial freedom, jeopardize family relationships, and ultimately settle for these lower quality healthcare, facilities just because you're chasing this hypothetical government handout.
Well, fair enough. All right, guys, like, subscribe, share this with anybody you think would benefit from it, especially if you have somebody who's contemplating doing a Medicare or Medicaid trust. There we go. Thanks, guys.